Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Lewiston Tribune podcast. My name is Trevan Pixley. I am your host, and join me for the third consecutive week is the city editor, the head honcho, because Butch isn't here, the main cheese, Matt Baney. Matt, how you doing?
Hey, Trev. Remember, I'm the managing editor now.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I know. Yeah, wow. I totally threw that through.
That's all right. That's all right.
Well, you know, me and Baney were hard at work on the new website, so my brain cells, which are a few already, so are getting depleted by the day. We are hard at work, but what is exciting is we get to kind of reminisce on a old job that we both had together, you know, two former sports guys. We get to touch on Bengal Field here, and helping us do that is the man that is assigned with writing about Bengal Field and its last day. Hosting a Lewiston football game, Mr. Cody Wendt. Cody, how are you doing?
Indeed, current sports guy Cody Wendt.
Yeah.
Yes. Who was a contemporary of Baney and Pixley in the department in a previous iteration. You wanted to know what you say, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Somehow.
The legacy response from Cody Wendt. Now, the Lewiston football team has been playing at Bengal Field for over 100 years, and now if you're watching this podcast here on YouTube, you are going to notice some very old school B-roll here. This is the Lewiston Bengals playing football from 1966, and we were able to acquire this in a unique way, and also joined in the studio. This is a jam-packed studio here for the Lewiston Tribune podcast. We got desk clerk Mr. Dusty Osbourne. Dusty, how did you acquire this old school football tape of the Lewiston Bengals?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and yes. So I acquired this by going to a rummage sale at my church, and belonged to one of the former coaches at the high school, and his wife had sold all of their items, downsizing really, and what happened was they decided probably didn't need it anymore, and I thought, hey, this looks pretty cool, so I took it home, and there's my my claim to fame. I'm just here because I brought in a VHS for you.
Hey, you brought in a VHS, and it was perfect timing for this story. So, Cody, kind of take me through, what you've found from this story, and just kind of take me through the historic Bengal Field.
Yes. Well, I won't make a habit of live fact-checking you here, I think, but you said it's been over 100 years they've been there, and you were wrong. It was, in fact, their inaugural game at Bengal Field was November 12th, 1934. I have the article here, so almost exactly 90 years. 89 years, 11 months ago, about. Lewiston, in fact, had actually had a Bengal Field before that. There has been such a thing as Bengal Field for almost exactly 100 years. So initially they had what we just called the Athletic Field, 1904 to 1934, and that sat about where the old Lewiston High School tennis courts are now, the ones along 11th Avenue that are much too close together, much more closely spaced than regulation tennis courts. Like the net posts are practically touching each other on the adjacent court. That's off topic. The point is that that's where the original field was. It was only known as the Athletic Field, I think, for about 20 years, until the Lewiston student body voted to dub themselves the Bengals in 1924. Then it was renamed Bengal Field, and it was Bengal Field for 10 years before it was replaced by what has been their home field now for 90 years. And it was, ushered in with quite the, array of fanfare. With the, they had bands, they had fireworks, they had, they had a dean then. I mean, they don't have a dean at the high school anymore. It sounds like the high school was a much better place 90 years ago to me. Anyway, but they had a record crowd. But then the Bengals went out and lost 13-0. However, they were playing a team that, according to the Tribune's report the next day, hopelessly outweighed them, and they managed to hold it to 0-0 for 3 quarters until the visiting Iowa Blue Devils broke through and beat them. So lots happened in the last 90 years. It was actually also the home field for multiple sports, for baseball, for track and field. It was the home to the Lewiston Bronx, the Lewiston Bronx minor league baseball team from 1952 to 1974. So it has a very extensive history. and you know, of course, those sports I think eventually got their own, you know, facilities or what have you, and branched out, or the Bronx just went defunct, and you know, so it's been football only for some years now, sharing between the high school and the the middle school teams, and. What else? They put up the first lights in 1937, over and above the objections of area residents who didn't want the light shining in their windows, but they had a curfew on their use. The first scoreboard put up in 1967, electronic scoreboard anyway. I'm sure they had a, you know, makeshift scoreboard of some kind before that. But yeah, so it's been a long time, but this was not actually the original field. There was one before it, and there's one coming after it, and that'll also be covered in my story. But maybe you want to let someone else talk now.
Yeah, you mentioned, so 1934, first year that the football team played there, correct?
Yes, and it was opened on Armistice Day, which we now call Memorial Day. And they had a big ceremony in that way, too.
So 1934, that's about as long as Baney's been on the planet.
Oh, man.
since about that year. And you were the sports editor for a long time. You know, what can you kind of say about Bengal Field, its history, and maybe, you know, some of your favorite moments, either, you know, a game you covered, game you remember as an editor, or even, you know, when you were in high school, maybe going as a fan.
Yeah. You know, everybody that lives in town is used to making pilgrimages there. Not just for football, but I'm sure a lot of people went to the circus there. That's one of its claim to fame.
Shriners Circus.
Yeah, the Shrine Circus is all there every year, usually right after school gets out in June. And there have been lots of other events that have happened there too. Yeah, baseball was a big part of it. I very early in my career, I wrote a story about a baseball wedding that happened at Bengal Field.
Ooh.
And that was in the 30s, and between games of a doubleheader, the man was a player on the team, and they got married at home plate, and it was a really cool photo that we ran with the story. And there was another event. I should have looked it up. Dusty and I have been talking about this. They demonstrated a flamethrower being used at the field, and so you know, and it's kind of course, it's sort of the sort of field they don't make nowadays. The facility at the new high school up in the Orchards looks great, you know, really neat, state of the art, all that, and of course it's, you know, out in an undeveloped area or not as developed. And Bengal Field is sort of like, you know, if you go to Wrigley Field in Chicago, or you go to Fenway Park in Boston, it's right in the middle of a neighborhood. You know, there's houses and buildings all around it, and so it's kind of old school in that way. I appreciate that. I mean, the new field will be great, but it's kind of, you know, you kind of miss the old school feel that a Bengal Field has.
Of course, and then Dusty too. I mean, you spent some time on the Lewiston sidelines during high school, and obviously a baseball junkie that you are. You know some history of the old minor league team that was in town. You know, what do you kind of like from Bengal Field?
Well, I was a water boy for the football team. 2008, 9, and 10. The fall of those years. So I have my memories of going with the football team and going, you know, to state one year at least. We ended up becoming in the Empire League champions that my first year. It was cool to do that and have little to no involvement on the field, but off the field, you know, helping, you know, keep them hydrated.
Yeah.
My dad also played on the Bengals back in the 70s with his brother and under Jay Henry, and so he. I honored him by wearing his football jersey number as I was out there with the water. That's the high quality H2O. So yeah.
High quality H2O.
Yes.
Yeah, and then going back to you, Cody. You know, talk to me about an old tradition that the Bengals used to have from 1934 to 1952. 10 games were played on Bengal Field during a specific holiday. Can you kind of touch on that one?
Thanksgiving, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. In fact, actually, I'll say this about Armistice Day, just a couple weeks before Thanksgiving. They apparently had a tradition which Lewis Clark State historian Stephen Branting told me about. Sounded interesting. They'd bring out a replica Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, you know, that monument they have in D.C. You know, they would bring that out to really make it special. So I guess that was a big tradition. Thanksgiving games were a big tradition. They really tried to, I guess, mark the big days in the fall in November. Of course, we don't usually have the football season run until Thanksgiving. These days, but it was an important thing in those days. They cared a lot about marking that occasion and marking it with a game. I don't remember any more specifics in particular on the Thanksgiving games. I believe they had some other ceremonialization of that occasion.
I've heard old timers talk about how it was kind of a tradition in town that you'd put your turkey in the oven and then you'd go to the game, watch the game, come home, and the turkey would be ready to go at that point. Hopefully no houses burned down.
That year they went to triple overtime. Everyone's turkeys were
it was
ruined.
A sad Thanksgiving. Everybody's turkey.
While you were doing the story, Cody, any other, just like historical facts or anything like that stuck out to you as interesting about, the Bengals or Bengal Field?
So they've played 442 home football games there, which, is a very solid number. They've gone 290, 137, and 15, according to the statistics provided to us by Denny Grubb, an area statman extraordinaire. 15 draws, that's remarkable to me, but of course football used to be a different sport to some extent, and so... No, the fact that they had the Lewiston Bronx... One guy I talked to also preparing for this article was Dick Riggs, a guy who is just a hair older than Bengal Field itself. Actually, not mockingly like Matt Baney. This guy is 91 years old. Dick Riggs. So, he was telling me how he won an American Legion baseball state title there in 1950. Graduated from Lewiston High in 1951, has watched generations of his descendants grow up and compete at Bengal Field. He's also the grandfather of Joel Damon, the famous area golfer. Of course, I don't think Joel Damon ever competed at Bengal Field. As far as I know, that has never been purposed into a golf course. Nevertheless, you could just think of this guy, 91 years old, was a baby when this field was first dedicated, and, played there himself, watched his children and his grandchildren, and he had a grandson, Lane Riggs, just graduated from Lewiston last year, 2023. So, I thought that was a remarkable thing to, just conceptualize, just imagine. This field really has, for some people been a mainstay just for generations.
And probably for the younger generation, they don't know it as a baseball venue, but it was that, which it hasn't been since... Probably the 70s was about the last time it was a baseball venue.
When they moved the high school baseball to Church Field is when they stopped playing there. Because in the 70s, I know from when I was in high school looking at old Bengals articles, they resurfaced the field around mid to late 70s, so that way it was mainly only for football at that time. So.
And in fact, like I was saying earlier, the Lewiston Bronx minor league baseball team, they played in the Pioneer League, so they were playing at Bengal Field up through 1974. So I know it had baseball at least through that point.
And some of the famous Bronx players that came through. Tony La Russa, who went on to a long managing career in the major leagues. He played for the Bronx. And very briefly, Reggie Jackson, famous home run hitter, he played for the Bronx as well. And there have been some others that have come through. And
John McNamara is
that's
one.
Right. That's right. And then, you think of some of the Lewiston High football players that have come through. Jim Ferris, my classmate who played in the NFL some, Jake Scott, some of the other great Bengals that ended up getting a little bit of taste of the NFL. So, seen a lot of talent go through there. It's I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. It's the new venue looks great. It really does. It'll be great, but it is a little sad to say goodbye.
Yes.
And of course, if we haven't mentioned when you're hearing this podcast, the last game is on Friday night at 7:00. That'll be the final home game at Bengal Field for Lewiston. And their first home game at the new venue is in 2 weeks. Is that right?
That sounds right. I could double check that. But they're playing against Hermiston, a Washington team that is a non-league opponent. Tomorrow is their final game at Bengal Field. So we'll have a slight update to that career record that I gave earlier.
This is actually a Washington.
Hermiston, Washington.
Really? Okay.
I looked it up.
I
They're
thought it was
Hermiston,
Hermiston,
Washington.
Oregon.
Steph talked about that yesterday, and I had thought it was Hermiston, Oregon as well.
But
I've
I
never
checked.
heard of Hermiston, Washington.
Nor I.
Yeah.
It should, unlike the original game at Bengal Field, perhaps, I don't want to make any predictions here, but maybe the Bengals can handle Hermiston, Washington.
I believe the Bengals are the favorites in this one. Yes, I'll add. Yes, the new facility. By the way, I talked with Lewiston High School principal Kevin Driscoll earlier today over the phone, and he was telling me a little bit about it. He says that it is I assumed they would carry on the dubbing, call it Bengal Field. But he says it is currently referred to as the P1FCU Sports Complex. Joining a growing list of P1FCU sports facilities in this area. Indeed, the Tribune has a P1FCU Prep Athlete of the Week. These people, KLEW broadcasters, also have a P1FCU Prep Athlete of the Week. The University of Idaho has a P1FCU sports facility. So does Lewis Clark State College. Now, Lewiston, and I admit, I myself, I was just going on a little rant here. I am a longtime patron of P1FCU. I've had, in fact, my first and only bank account, founded about 20 years ago, is with P1FCU. And yet I feel some degree of, resentment at P1FCU taking over all these institutions. I just feel like they should stop at one sports facility and one prep athlete of the week. Anyway.
It will be hard if you say, well, we're at the P1FCU building. You're like, okay, which one's that?
There are two P1FCU sports facilities in Lewiston alone.
No,
the Lewiston home facility and the Lewis Clark State.
No, I'm at the bank. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah. Thankfully, ICCU got in for that one arena at Idaho. Otherwise, they'd have neighborhood P1FCU sports facilities, and you'd be completely confused.
Yeah, Bengal Field definitely gives off. It's an old school football field. When you go out there, it feels like an 8-man football field. It's on par with the Kendricks of the world. And it's like if it gets too rainy, it's gonna get muddy. Your jerseys are gonna get dirty. It's not the turf. And things like that. So it's gonna be an old school relic that I think that this area is gonna miss. I think.
And let me turn the tables on you for a sec, Trevan. You're the only one among us here who played football on Bengal Field, and how did it compare to other venues you played on?
Yeah, no, I think it was cool to play in the Kibbe Dome back before the P1FCU got added to the Kibbe Dome, and Holt Arena before a bank got onto that one too, which I can't remember what bank that is, but it was always it felt more natural, like you weren't gonna be picking AstroTurf, bullets out of your cleats and stuff, playing at Bengal Field. And it had so many synonymous games to it. You would play the Bengal Cup there when you were playing football for SAC, when you played Jennifer. I think I had more memorable middle school, maybe, football games played at Bengal Field, which, you would think that the middle school will still be able to play, big games at Bengal Field, which will be, huge. And I think the high school, while it is, I think, sad that such like an old school, field isn't going to be their home field anymore, I think it's going to be cool for the middle schoolers to play at that field with so much history, and then, you're going to get rewarded with this huge, massive, football field that's super cool.
Yeah.
Something I probably would have liked when I was in high school. I'm not going to be like the old man yells at cloud, like, don't ever change anything. I do think this is a cool opportunity for those kids playing football right now. Yeah. All right, guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for episode number 3 of the Lewiston Tribune podcast. You guys can read Cody Wendt's story on this topic of Bengal Field today. Actually, you can go onto the Lewiston Tribune website and click on that. There will be a link to this in the YouTube description if you're listening to it on YouTube, or if you're watching on the website, you can just go over to the sports tab, click on it, and give it a read. Thank you guys again for tuning in to another edition of the Lewiston Tribune podcast, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.